If you're an American conservative, you know that the societal values we hold sacred are under attack. They are hanging in the balance. How can you protect those values? By staying informed. The Closing Argument will deliver news and supporting evidence you need to support and defend those values. Here's Paul Smith.
Good morning. This is Paul Smith, your host of The Closing Argument. In this podcast, we discuss some of the important but controversial legal, moral, and political issues that affect us and our families today. Some of the things we discuss are not politically correct, but all of the things we discuss are important to help establish the truth and to let the world know that there are many people who challenge some of the views that are gaining acceptance in our schools, our media, and our government, but which views really are wrong. Anyway, today we're going to talk about the 2022 senatorial campaign for re-election by Senator Mike Lee in Utah. He's running against Evan McMullin. And this is significant for a couple of reasons. We don't usually get into different state issues that much, but because of what I'm going to explain, this really has some significance for the Republican Party. The opposition to Senator Lee is primarily coming from Republicans in Utah who oppose Trump because they say he is evil. And even though some of his philosophies and policies, and maybe even most of them are good, he is painted to be so bad by some of them that they cannot vote for him, and therefore they look to someone else to support. So what we're going to do today, just to give you an idea of some of the things we will discuss, we're going to go back to the 2016 presidential election and what happened in Utah. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the impeachment trials of President Trump, and then bring you up to speed with what's going on in Utah. So first of all, in 2016, of course, Donald Trump defeated Hillary Clinton in the 2016 election. Some of you may not have been following this one part of it, but I was, because in Utah in October there was at least one poll that showed that McMullen was outpolling Trump in Utah, and Hillary Clinton was a third place finish. But this concerned me because if McMullen had succeeded in getting the electoral votes of Utah, even though there weren't that many, there were four, 2 senators and 2 representatives. This, in a close election, this could have made the difference between Trump prevailing and Hillary Clinton prevailing. It turned out that it wouldn't have mattered. Trump ended up having enough electoral votes regardless of what happened in Utah. But it was of concern to me, so I was watching it closely. And of course, I have some friends and family out there in Utah, and so I follow it for that reason too. McMullen had supported Mitt Romney in the 2012 election. I supported Mitt at that time too. McMullen was a part of the Romney campaign, and though Romney lost the 2012 election, he thereafter was offered and served in some positions for Republicans in Congress for a couple of years. Then in 2016, in August, which is a very late time in 2016, he decided he was going to run as an independent in Utah, opposing both Hillary Clinton and Mitt Romney. And he ended up getting about 21 or 22% of the vote. Now, Trump got the majority of votes, and therefore he took all of the electoral votes in Utah. So it bothered me at the time, and I personally was disturbed at what McMullen was doing. He did not have any chance of winning the presidency. He was only on ballots in about a dozen states, but his intents to run came so late he didn't have a chance to get on the ballot in every state. And his stated purpose was hopefully that his running could bring the election to the House of Representatives and to Congress to decide who should be elected. McMullen was basically a Republican, and that's why the Republicans brought him to Washington for a couple of years after the 2012 election. But he ran as an independent in 2016. He thereafter has been closely aligned with Romney and has continued to get the support of the people who oppose Trump because of his being what they call evil. And I wrote about that issue in my newsletter several years ago that, my goodness, clearly Trump has some flaws, but to call him evil, oh my goodness, that's a little bit strained. And in fact, he did many good things and had some wonderful policies. And my concern initially in 2016, when I had been a supporter of Ted Cruz, I was wondering how conservative Trump would be because he had a history of aligning himself with Democrats and their policies. Turns out he was very conservative in his policies. So although maybe he may go down in history as one of the rudest presidents, but actually did some very good things. And to call him evil because of his overt rudeness, that's what, other candidates had evil aspects as well. And the one guy who went without scrutiny and all that was Evan McMullin. And I didn't know much about whether he's evil or not. I know there's some good things about him too. So that happened in 2016. Then move forward, Trump was elected, and of course, immediately following his election, his opponents sought to impeach him literally from the day he was elected and the day he was inaugurated. And eventually, in December 2019, the House passed articles of impeachment, and they finally found something that they thought they could impeach him for because the Russian collusion thing didn't go anywhere. But he had this conversation with Zelensky, the recently elected Zelensky in the Ukraine, and some of Trump's opponents sought to say that was a bribery-related phone call. And the grounds for impeachment of a president are treason, bribery, or some other high crime or misdemeanor. There was no ultimate bribery found in the impeachment trial. In fact, the first impeachment trial was conducted in January, and eventually, I believe it was late January or February, where the Senate voted, and they voted to acquit Trump. It was, I think, a 53-47 vote, if I remember correctly. Only one Republican voted to convict Trump, and that was Mitt Romney. That infuriated me because, as somewhat of a constitutional scholar, there are so many serious flaws in the House's case that no one could vote to convict Trump without repudiating the Constitution. So the Constitution says that the grounds for impeachment are either treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. And in the case of the charges brought against Trump, none of those were even stated. And therefore, without repudiating the Constitution, no one could have supported that impeachment. But they disliked Trump so much that they proceeded, and to the inevitable result of an acquittal, which happened. And again, Mitt Romney was the only Republican to vote to convict in that proceeding. And I've written extensively about that. That was very upsetting. And the fact that I feel that way is not a vouching for the greatness of Mr. Trump's character. It's just constitutionally, it was terrible. Let me mention two or three other aspects of it. The charges were vague, insufficient. There wasn't evidence of them. They talked a lot about quid pro quo of the phone conversation, and there being a quid pro quo is certainly part of a bribe, but not all quid pro quos are bribes, and presidents would often ask things of other individuals, but there wasn't anything that he asked that was and received that was an individual benefit to him. It was just just totally inadequate charge. So this brings us back, and then of course after the election of 2020, where Biden prevailed, Trump was of course impeached again, and they tried him after. Beginning on January 25th, after Trump was no longer even in office, which in my opinion is another abuse of the Constitution. And they charged him with inciting an insurrection and other charges that were vague, such as abuse of power. And this one had a similar result, although there were more Republicans that voted to convict. It was 57 to 43, I think, was the result of this election. And Romney, of course, was on board with that. So he has fallen out of my good graces. I haven't asked for my campaign contributions back, but I don't intend to give him any more. He actually, Mr. Romney, is now on the opposite side from Senator Mike Lee on many issues. And I happen to agree with Mike Lee. And interestingly, though, I live in Maryland, and so why does Utah matter to me? Well, one thing that matters is I'm in Maryland. I'm known to be a Mormon, and so in my community, and I'm very active in the Republican Party. So my Republican friends were asking me, what's happening to Romney? What about this or that? And they know that I've supported him really very strongly in 2012. But I have to tell them that Romney is wrong. He's gone astray. And I can no longer support him in almost everything. I just can't trust his vote. On the other hand, I am very supportive of Mike Lee. He and Ted Cruz seem to be kind of joined at the hip in virtually everything. And I mean, that doesn't mean I necessarily agree with everything Mike Lee would do, but he's been very good and the kind of person I would want in the Senate. So I'm very concerned that someone is trying to unseat him in Utah. So who is that trying to unseat him? It's Evan McMullin. Now, he'll have a hard time pinning the evil label on Mike Lee. So he has a more difficult task. I don't think he's going to get 21% of the vote. But this program, I think, will air for the first time on Tuesday, June 21st. And the Utah primary is a week later. So we'll see how Evan McMullin does. The Utah election campaign is very interesting because in the primaries, which will be June 28th, 2022, Lee is being challenged by two women, but not by Evan McMullin. Evan McMullin is running as an independent. So I presume Lee will prevail in getting the nomination of the Republican Party. The fascinating thing on the Democrat side is I don't believe they have a nominee from what I've read. They know that McMullen is running as an independent, and therefore the Democrat Party has endorsed McMullen, and I don't believe they're advancing their own candidate. So that's fascinating. McMullen is basically showing himself to be all about himself, trying to make some, trying to cast some bad things about Mike Lee, but he has to run as an independent, and basically it's all about himself, and he's no longer even with the party. Now, he wasn't actually officially with the party when he ran for president, but we'll see whether McMullen's influence is on the rise or whether it will begin to wane. I want to say a couple of things about McMullen's policies. When he has many that are okay, there are a couple that stand out. The one that most stands out to me is he is on board with the climate change extremists. In other words, he believes we are experiencing catastrophic climate change and we have to act or else there are going to be serious problems. And of course, I've written about that in my book, The